Growing up, my grandpa, the one we call Pa, used to say, or actually still does say it, but he'd say, "I like it when a plan comes together." And for this spring and early summer at least, my succession planting plan has came together fairly well for me. Succession planting is one of my favorite things about gardening because it lets me try so many different varieties of the same crop. We all don't have room to plant every single variant of every crop in our first planting, but with succession planting we get to try a lot of different things, and by the end of the season we can kind of, gather our notes together and see which ones did the best for us and know which ones we want to plant in future years. Now, a lot of people will say, well, when I plant them squash in early spring and we're picking squash for a couple months, I just get tired of squash. I don't want any more squash. I don't want to grow any more squash. I don't want to have to find something to do with all this squash. But there are so many different varieties of squash, for example, out there that you can grow. Straight neck, crook neck, patty pan, lots of different colors of patty pan, zucchini, green zucchini, yellow zucchini, 8-ball or round squash. We've got yellow, pale green, and dark green versions of those. So lots of different stuff you can try, and succession planting is the way to experiment and try those different things. So today I want to take the opportunity to show you how some of our succession planting is going. Some of the varieties in our second plantings are starting to produce now, and we've even got our third plantings just up and going, just breaking the ground. Now, this is the first year I have ever succession planted sweet corn in the spring and early summer. So we had some right there. We need to get that plot cleaned up a little bit. And then this right here, our temptress, is just now starting to tassel. We should start seeing some silks pretty soon. The pollen isn't matured on there, ready to fall off, but it's getting there, and we should start seeing silks as soon as that has happened. This stuff here, considering the heat units and considering how late corn usually tassels out shorter, this here got, fairly tall. We're on up about 6 feet in most places. So nice looking second crop of sweet corn here. We've been feeding it well, and just super pleased with growing corn a second time here. I'm glad I tried this, and I'm definitely going to be doing it in future years. And I didn't plan for it this year, but next year I'm probably even going to try squeezing a third kind of midsummer crop of sweet corn in. From my experiences here, if I got it on drip irrigation, if I can give it plenty of water, if I can fertilize it right when it needs some nutrients, I think I can pull it off. So next year I'm going to plan for 3 plantings of sweet corn, so we have 3 harvests instead of just 1, which we've had in the past. Now let's talk about our bean succession planting. So we had several different varieties of bush beans and even a row of pole beans over there. And those all produced well for us. We've since got those out of here, put those canary melons in. We showed you that on a previous video. And our last succession planting of beans is right here, these half runner beans. And now these things are actually putting on beans there. Probably be another day or so before I get in here and pick these guys. Now this was a chance, kind of a risk we were willing to take, and this is always the case on that last succession planting you do. You see, when it gets real hot, these beans will start dropping those blooms there. These haven't started dropping so far that I've noticed, which means we're going to get at least 1 or 2 harvests off these guys. But that was just it was just an experiment. I really wanted to try these half runners here, and if it did strike off way too hot and they started dropping blooms, oh well, no big deal. But it's always worth trying to squeeze in 1 more crop there for a little extra production. So besides beans and corn, the other 2 big crops that we succession plant around here are squash and cucumbers. And y'all just look at this plot here for a minute. Now I got a few weeds in there because all this rain, I need to clean it up a little bit, but man, I'm super proud of how pretty this plot right here is. Lots of good stuff in here. Sunflowers, eggplant. But we're gonna focus on these squash and cucumbers right here. So we had a plot of squash way over there, closer to the house, planted, and we've already got those up. And then these guys, man, they have grown fast and started producing. I believe it's only been 35 or 40 days since we planted these guys, and already starting to get some harvest. We got several different varieties in here, and I want to show you what each of them is looking like and kind of tell you about each one. So on the first row here is where we've got our round zucchinis, and we got 3 different varieties here, just basically 3 different colors of these. So the first third of the row is this variety called One Ball, and it's a yellow round zucchini. You can see them there. That guy is ready to pick. When these guys get about the size of a pool ball, like that, that's when they're ready to pick. So we need to come in and grab a few of these. There's another one right there. Aren't those pretty? And these things are great. You can slice them up, cook them just like regular zucchini, or you can just cut them in half, throw them on the grill, and they're fine that way. So we got a few of those one ball plants here. If we get on down here, we'll see our second variety. And this variety here is called Cue Ball. And it's kind of this light green round zucchini you see there. And these things load up. There's 2 on that plant right there I need to get. And then if we walk down towards the end of the row, we'll see our third variety, which is called 8 Ball. And there's one right there that's almost about to get too big. You see there, it's a darker green than that other one there. And really looking forward to having all 3 of these colors here. It's just gonna make for a pretty harvest, but also gonna look good in our vegetable bags we do, having kind of that medley of colors from all 3 of these round zucchini varieties. And on our second row here is more traditional yellow squash. First one we've got here is our Gold Star, which is a crookneck, or kind of like a semi-crookneck smooth squash. This was our winner from our first planting, so we carried it over. This is the only variety that we've planted again from the first planting because we liked it so much. Now, here's a good little example to show you. When you grow these things later in the summer, disease pressure is going to be higher, and you just need to, you know, tamper your expectations a little bit and know that these things ain't going to last as long as that first crop did. But you're going to get you some good harvest off of them. But that disease is going to set in quicker because it's more humid out here. It's hotter, you know, just disease pressure gets higher. So you're going to start seeing a little bit of this a lot sooner than you did on your spring plantings. Looks like some downy mildew there. But it is what it is, and we'll get plenty of squash off these, and then when they just look like they're overtaken with disease, we'll get them out of here. So the second variety here I want to show you, and this variety has been absolutely amazing. This variety is called Slick Pick. Now, as I've said in some of our other videos, this squash is not going to win any beauty contest, but it is the earliest producing squash I have ever seen. It was at least a week or so ahead of that Gold Star, which is an early producer itself. Makes these kind of long, slender squashes there. See if I can find you a better picture. Here we go. Some of them have a little bit of a curve or knot in them, but they're great little slicing squash. They taste good, nothing wrong with them at all. They're just not, you know, quite as pretty as that Gold Star is. But I believe this is the most productive variety of yellow squash I've ever grown. Look at that one right there. There's at least 5 or 6 squash on there at one time. Just amazing how productive these things have been. So if you want a quick crop of squash, you know, you got a little bit of time, you need something that's gonna, you know, get going and produce fast, this Slick Pick is the way to go. And our last row here for our second succession planting of squash zucchini are these Paschal zucchinis here. And you can always tell a zucchini leaf because it's got those kind of incisions on them and those kind of white splotches on them. Now this Paschal variety is a very, very disease resistant variety. One reason why I wanted to plant it, kind of test it out. So we grew the Spineless Supreme earlier this year. Now we got the Paschal green zucchini. And I do believe these are slightly more productive than the Spineless Supreme was. I've been picking about 2 zucchinis off of these plants every picking, whereas when I grew the Spineless Supreme, it was just kind of one big zucchini. So these are making a smaller, let me go back over here and show you. These appear to be making a smaller zucchini, so not those big long ones like the Spineless Supreme made, but it makes more of them. So if you like the smaller zucchini and the heavier production, this is a good way to go. Spineless Supreme just makes a bigger zucchini, just not as many of them. So we talked about corn, beans, squash / zucchini. And the last thing we really like to succession plant in the warm season is cucumbers. So in our first planting of cucumbers, we grew some slicers over that way. In our second planting, we grew all pickles with this Max Pack variety. And I know y'all may be tired of hearing me talk about this variety, but this is the most amazing pickle variety I have ever seen. Now, you would think by now, considering how long these things have been growing, that the production would have dropped off a little bit, but it just hasn't. Still getting about a 7-gallon bucket every other day off these guys. Now, what's kind of been nice, so when they first started producing, all my cucumbers were kind of down here at the bottom where those vines kind of first start growing. So you kind of had to bend over and reach through there and fumble through there and find all your pickles. But now that they've got up on this trellis good, you can see that foliage down there is kind of starting to die off a little bit, look a little rough. But this foliage up here still looks really good. And so now all my cucumbers are kind of up here, you know, waist level. I can come along here with my picking bucket, pick them a lot quicker. They're easier to see, and we can just work through here better. You can see a lot of times they'll double up like that. You just grab you a handful of pickles at a time when you're going through and picking these guys. So these guys, I'm just gonna let them keep going. It's not like, you know, sometimes we see with squash, they get disease ridden and we get them out of there, or the production declines. I haven't seen any decline in production yet. When that does happen, or they look like they're real disease, I'll be glad to get them out of here quick. But for right now, man, these things are just keep kicking along and giving us some nice pickle production here in the early summer. And the last thing I want to show you guys here is my third planting of squash and cucumbers, which are just starting to break the ground. So for this third planting, I've just got one row of squash and one row of cucumbers over there. In this plot here, we still got some collards that are hanging on there. Still probably pick those a couple more times. These marigolds are still looking awesome, doing their thing. We did throw some drip underneath the marigolds and the collards, which we didn't have before, because we definitely wanted to put these squash and cucumbers on drip. So this is a variety here called Alexandria. This is a Lebanese squash. Never tried growing these before, but we added them to the site earlier this year, and looks like I got real good germination there. I planted these guys thick because I needed more than one seed packet, but not quite two. So I just went ahead and put 2 whole packets along this row. I'll come in and thin them out when they get a little bit bigger to every 2 foot or so. But got a nice little stand here, and I expect these things to start taking off and growing pretty fast. And then for our cucumbers, so we did slicers first, we did Diomede and Stonewall first, and we did the Max Pack pickles, which I showed you earlier. And then for my third planting, I'm going back to slicers here, just to keep it mixed up. And we got a variety here called Olympian. And I've grown this one before, makes a real nice uniform slicing cucumber. This is a gynoecious variety, so we always want to make sure we plant at least, you know, 20-25 seeds or so we get those male pollinizer plants planted. And we'll thin these out a little bit. Once they get taller, we'll come in, put in a Hortonova trellis there so they can climb along that, because I got them tucked in here pretty tight between the edge of this plot and those collards. So as you can see, succession planting like we do allows us to try lots of different varieties of things like squash, cucumbers, sweet corn, and even beans. And then we can take all that information and understand which varieties are going to perform well for us the next year. So it's a great way to experiment with new varieties. It's also a great way to test the disease resistance of some varieties, because your disease pressure is going to be higher this time of year in the summer. So testing some of these really, highly acclaimed disease-resistant varieties to see how well they do in your climate with your disease pressure. So I know a lot of you may be wondering, well, what can I still squeeze in my zone where I'm at? So just to give you kind of some reference here, we're in zone 8B in South Georgia, and I just planted that third crop of squash and cucumbers about a week ago. Now I won't plant any more, that's my last planting. I probably could have planted them, this week or today and still been fine to get a little harvest there. If you're north of us, if you're in zone 8A, 7B, 7A or further up, you probably still have time to squeeze in one more crop of squash, cucumbers, maybe even beans, certainly sweet corn. So for those of you watching out there, tell me about your succession planting plan for early to mid-summer. Are you still putting things in the ground? Maybe you're switching over to flowers and cover crops like we've done in some of our plots. What are you planting out there? What new varieties are you trying in this second or third succession planting? I'll put some links below to all the varieties we talked about or that I showed you today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit that bell button so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. If you did enjoy this one, check out these other two videos right here that we've done on succession planting in the past. I think you'll really enjoy those as well. We'll see you next time.